Gracias, Edwin, for inviting me. So I'm very honored to be here. So I will talk English because I don't talk Spanish. So if I go too fast, just and if a lot of things are unclear, just tell me. Maybe we could sort of translate. But so I'm very happy to see all you here, and especially because I see a lot of young people. And because this is going to be the environment in which you are going to design. So I've been told that there's a lot of designers here, and this what is now called Internet of Things, or what was called ambient intelligence in 2000, or pervasive computing, or ubiquitous computing, or cybernetics. This has a history, and the history is basically to make everything, as the engineers say, sort of smart. To put computing not only into computers, but also into smartphones, but also into coffee machines, or basically any object that we can think of. So designing in the coming 10 years will always mean designing something in relationship to other objects, products, services, or systems. So I think it's very good that you're here today, and I think I dare say that what I have to say in the coming sort of hour really is what is going on now in this very moment. So what is this Internet of Things? It has two main technical sides. On the one hand, it's an ecology of barcodes. If you have any sort of bottle, you find a barcode. Hopefully I find a barcode. Yes, barcode. 1974, we have QR codes. If you go and to travel, then you print your boarding pass now with a QR code. We have Rfid. Started out in the 50s with English Spitfires with active RFID in the cones of their noses, sending out signals so that the British on the ground could down the German planes and not the British Spitfires. From the 50s, we know it as this RFID into access control. I think the traffic card system here in Mexico City now has RFID, so you put your card into the reader. The reader gives a little bit of energy. Your card has a small antenna and a small chip, and it plays back a number to the system, and the number says pass, no pass. Sort of, that's the basic idea of RFID. We have a lot of sensors in the cities, temperature sensors, moisture sensors, cameras, sort of, and they're all generated an enormous amount of data. And then we have IPv6. So in the 80s, the internet system as we know it was built for 4 billion unique IP addresses, basically because the people thought it up in the 80s, could not envisage more than 4 billion desktop computers, as they were working with desktops. And they could not see smartphones coming, and they could not see all these microprocessors coming. So they made an internet for 4 billion unique IP addresses, and they are now gone. So we have over 4 billion unique IP addresses gone, and so there's a new system being installed, IP version 6. And this means that everything, any object that we will have, from an electrical toothbrush to the coffee machine, refrigerator, washing machines, will have a unique IP address. There's more IP addresses in this IPv6 system than grains of sand, I've been told. So it's an enormous amount of, we don't have to worry that this will go quickly. So this is sort of, these are the main technical drivers. One coming from logistics, asset control, wanting to know where your stuff is. And when around 2000, I was asking people, in supply chain and logistics. Why would you want all this data? Why do you want RFID on your bottle? Why do you want every object on the planet, like this T-shirt as well, uniquely identified with an RFID tag? Sort of why? And basically, I got no real answer because they don't know why. But there's one big argument, and that is that the world has become very, very insecure and uncontrollable. So if you have a business, all you have is large data sets. And the bigger and larger these data sets are, the better the data mining you can do on these sets, and the better the scenarios that you can get from these data sets. That was basically the argument that I always got. We don't care at what point in time the raw data gets to us. We just want the amount of data that we can get, and we want more and more of it, because the more we have, the better our scenarios will be of predicting the future. That's sort of the basic argument. Because when I thought about this in 2000, why you would want to uniquely tag everything, even today, sometimes you wonder why this is sort of necessary. But I can tell you that it is happening, and that it's also quite inevitable for your generation. There's no real way to stop it anymore. So we have to steer it and design in and with it. So these are the two main technical drivers. So you have logistics, supply chain, I want to know where my stuff is. And you have this IP46, let's put software into any project, any product, and let's connect that to the cloud. Also that is very recent. If you read the debates in the 90s, it's all about the cost of data space storage. And in the 90s, even imagining having a large database was very expensive, and people would not even contemplate or consider the fact that at one point we could have, for example, a movement sensor here, and I would do this, and it would sort of put up all these points and store them somewhere temporarily. That would take money. It would cost something. So it's only around 2000 that we get this sort of notion of the cloud, that we get this idea that we can store data infinitively, and we can retrieve it infinitively, and we can play with it also there in the cloud. Then, of course, considering the fact that the browser is only 11 years old, so we still talk about 1993 Mosaic, the first browser. We're now still at 2014. Makes all of this even more strange in a way, if you want to think about this. I mean, this is immense convergence of these sort of very close to the object RFID, and then this sort of internet IP46 that's put internet in everything. So we have two very big pushers, and then we have one big pull, and that's us, it's ourselves. I think everyone here has a smartphone at the moment, I guess, or everyone here has some kind of phone. And I think most of you are on Facebook somehow, and most of you are sort of like on Twitter. And sometimes when you sort of travel, as I sort of travel and talk about these things, like sort of meeting people of a certain age, anywhere you realize there is a local component, but there's a huge, huge commonality in having grown up in the browser, which really defines a generation, as you were defined by that. But that's us, basically. And in 1991, Mark Weiser, then at Xerox PARC, writes a text, Computing for the 21st Century. And it's a very, very good text to read. It's like, I think, 8 pages, 10 pages. It's not very long. It's very clear. And Mark Weiser is sitting behind his desk, and he has a computer, he has a desktop, and he has a mouse, and he has a keyboard. And the mouse is from 1964. So if you Google mouse 1964, you get a beautiful, beautiful wooden mouse designed by Douglas Engelbart. It's really this beautiful wooden mouse. It's just like you can look at it for ages. And if you Google the computer in 1946, 1964, sorry, you get the Cray 2, and you have Seymour Cray actually leaning against his Cray 2 because it's a very big thing. So Mark Weiser is sitting there in 1991 thinking, in 1964, the computers looked like very, very big refrigerators. And we already had this mouse. And I'm sort of 40, 50 years back later, and I'm still accessing my computer with this keyboard and this mouse. So in his view, what had happened in this 50 years was to basically make the world ready for personal computing. Even in the 80s, there's people who are going to say that nobody's going to want a computer in their home because it will remind them of work, so you don't want that. So we have a lot of arguments saying that we needed a lot of mental molding of making us as people really happy and really comfortable around all these computing and computing power. And that happened in these 50 years. So we decentralized them, we made them smaller, we made sure that they were everywhere. But our interaction with them was still the same kind of interaction as 50 years back, which was, and it still is most of the time, with a keyboard and a mouse. So Mark Weiser says, 1991, this is not good. So we need to take some of the computing power out of this computer and put it into my chair. So my chair finally recognizes me when I come home. But he also says, I have a computer and I've been working with this for years, but this computer still doesn't know me. So it doesn't, I know this computer is mine, but the computer doesn't know that I'm working with it. So we should take a little bit of this intelligence out of this computer and put it into my home, so I get a smart home. And we should put it into the streets, so we get smart streets and smart cities. That was basically the argument. And this argument sort of is now becoming real. At that time, it was called pervasive computing, ubiquitous computing. Around 2000, especially Philips in Europe tried it with ambient intelligence. And all of this still exists. So we have very strong communities of researchers in ambient intelligence, pervasive computing. There's UbiComp conferences still going on. But unfortunately for them, the winning term now seems to be the Internet of Things. And that's basically what it is. So it's a winning term of something that has been going on for quite some time. It has a history, and studying that history is a very good thing to do. So these three, we have this triangle. So we have this push from supply chain logistics, individuate all objects. Again, with any kind of sane mind, it took me years to understand this basically, to get this idea that you would want to have every object on the planet individually traceable and trackable. It's like a security, intelligence, spy novel dream, right? So sort of to make this real, something seems to be quite strange, but it's happening. And then we have internet and IP46, sort of basically in anything with a little bit of software, and software is running in basically anything at the moment. But it's not only tech push, it's not only sort of some kind of strange technology outside of us pushing us sort of in directions that we do not want to go. It seems that as humans, we also do want to go there, sort of. And you can think about arguments like we are quite tribal people still. We are really, really happy around our families and around 30 people. We are in big cities now. 70 to 80% of people will be in the cities in 2020. We don't feel happy all the time in these cities. We want to be in touch with our tribe all the time, which we are doing with our WhatsApp and our Facebook and our Twitter and sort of like that. And as people are maybe sometimes just people in our tribes, we will also get more objects. And these objects will take on qualities of our friends and of people, and become also more friends in our sort of way as we move around the city, for example. So I can have a very friendly building or a very friendly lantern pole that also that sends me some data when I sort of am in a neighborhood, or that tracks my friends for me when I'm, so things like that. You can think about that. So that also took me quite some time to realize that it's not just tech push. but it's basically us, or also us. And it's, of course, it's the balance that we have to design. You are going to be the main focus. I mean, you're going to be the main difference between the quality of this environment. If you don't invest good thinking in this, it's going to be very poor. If you invest a lot of thinking in this and work, then maybe we can end up with some good environment that is sort of somehow sort of smart, that it has this balance between the push and the pull. But the quality of that at the moment is still uncertain. The outcome is still uncertain. So if you want to define it in another way, you can say that this Internet of Things is the seamless flow, and seamless is the engineer term. And that's also a very tricky term. It's a dangerous term. That's the term that says, I want to move through these networks, and I don't want any glitch. I don't want anything to happen to me. I want everything to work perfectly in this environment. Well, I think we all know that nothing works perfectly, and that you will always have, especially when you're coding, that you will always have bugs. But somehow the assumption is made that we can make a system without bugs, where we can have the seamless flow. But whenever you see this word seamless, you got to be careful, and you have to really think about it in your own way. Between these networks, so there's the body network, the BAN, the body area network, and we see there's enormous amount of work there on T-shirts. There's ambient hearing aids. So Siemens has a hearing aid that gets all the data from and information from where you're walking in a city. And if, for example, there would be a fire truck with a certain noise, then your hearing aid would know that this fire truck is coming 3 blocks away and you're walking into it. It could already start to filter, and you will never ever hear that there's a fire truck sort of coming. So things like that. But of course, here we also have the Google Glass and we have the Google Lens. And then the idea is that this body area network, which is basically everything coming off my body to measure my steps with my Fitbit and with all these wearables, that is really, really totally booming now. So iWatches, wearables, all that. It needs a gateway. So somehow all this data needs to go somewhere. It can go to the cloud directly, or it could go to a local router, or it could stay somewhere in my refrigerator for like a day and then send it somewhere or make an analysis. But there's a gateway. There's always a gateway. And so what people are doing at the moment is occupying these gateways. For example, with the local area network, basically the gateway will be the smart meter. That will measure your energy. It will measure sort of what all your appliances sort of are doing, and if they could be streamlined a little bit better maybe. And that smart meter can become some kind of a home interface. So when you go on holiday, you can say, well, this neighbor could come here, but they could not visit this room, for example, and sort of things like that, like you in a kind of app way that you have now on your smartphone. That's the local area network. And then you have the wide area network, which is basically telematics. It's the car, it's the train, it's the plane, it's the bike, it's mobility. And then you have the very wide area network, which is the city. And the city, every city in the world is now a city that wants to be smart or wise. And they want to be an e-city. So, yeah, we got to get the smart Mexico City URL quickly, because for somebody else does it. But this is basically one way to define Internet of Things, as sort of moving from gateway to gateway to gateway to gateway. Because I, as an end user, I'm going to pay for whoever is going to give me the best scenario and the best predictions of my health, my home, my mobility, and all the stuff sort of that's happening around me in the city. I'm not going to pay for providers. So I'm not going to pay Google for my body area network, Samsung for my local area network, Mercedes from my sort of car wide area network, and then some people or factions in the city for all kinds of data that are being opened at the moment with all these smart cities. Now, if you look at what Google is doing, Google is occupying all these gateways. So Google has two ways into the body, the Google glasses and the Google Lens. They have two ways into the home, the Google Power Meter. They had the Power Meter, didn't work really well, so they bought Nest. Nest they bought for $3 billion, which sort of opened up a lot of capital thinking and venture capital to the fact that this Internet of Things now is real, because Google pays $3 billion for Nest. But they already had the Power Meter. But the Power Meter, they didn't really work, or wasn't so trendy. So Nest was. So they didn't care about how much they paid for it. They just want ways into these gateways. With the car, in the wide area network, they have the car. They have a self-driving car. And they're selling all their expertise throughout the whole automotive chain. So whatever car you're buying, Google will be in that car. And then they have Google Org, and they're sponsoring billions across the planet on open data projects. And basically they are in every library in the world. Now, I'm not saying that we should sort of do something against Google. I mean, that's not the point. The point is that they're very clever. This was also their strategy for a long time ago. Vincent Cerf and Bob Kahn, they wrote a text in '88 on no bots, basically building Google and predicting Google as an organizational unit at the same time. So there went an enormous amount of thinking into this. Of course, Apple is trying to do this, and everybody now, all the big industrial conglomerations and corporations are building together partnerships to at least be in one of these gateways. Because if you are not in this gateway, you will be gone as an industry. We had examples in the 19th century of the Russian railways, of people buying shares in the Russian railways and ending up with nothing. We've seen enormous amount of industries going down before the internet. If you look at the top 100 companies before the internet, after the internet is 80% different. And we will see the same with this Internet of Things. So the internet took out an enormous amount of middlemen, and this Internet of Things will do the same. And it will reshape what is industry and what is data, what is service, what are the new business models. Drastically. So in that sense, it's extremely disruptive, and people are beginning to feel the disruptiveness of this as we speak. And then, of course, you can also see that how important the city is. IBM Cisco, for example, is going to all the cities. No doubt they were also here in Mexico City. They managed to solve their platform in Rio de Janeiro, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they are very much entitled to sell. But the thing is that I believe that these gateways should be public gateways, and that this system should be a public system, and these gateways should be shared by many, many stakeholders, not just the ones who are very, very cleverly already occupying these gateways, because these gateways will form the new power. So we also must not kid ourselves that there's no more democracy in this picture. There is no more voting. I mean, that's just a charade. It doesn't really make any more sense. There's no more politicians also actually making decisions in this kind of system. Sometimes you can wonder if that's good or bad, but still, this is basically effectively the new power structure. And as this new power structure is a global new power structure. So this is the kind of thinking that we have now, that all these marketplaces, future businesses, sort of with ICT and with all this connectivity in everything that you do, will drastically change how businesses operate. The new Boeing has 200 separate items that have their own monitoring systems. This means that if I deliver a service, or if I make something for this one particular process, Boeing can no longer hide legacy costs or any other kind of overhead into this particular service that I'm delivering. I, as an end user, get to see the same real-time data that they have, that they are generating, which means that people are beginning to understand that what they thought was going to happen, to monitor a lot of their systems in closed environments as they had been doing in factories for a long, long time, they would still also be able to control all that data. It would not go outside. But they're finding that it's actually going outside. They can no longer control it themselves totally. And it also means that the hottest thing in this field at the moment is business models, because these are changing sort of rapidly and constantly, because what people paid for at one particular amount of time, in one particular moment, is not what they're going to pay for tomorrow. So this is basically this is going to be your job. So this is the new way of how things are going to operate. And I don't understand it myself really, because it's happening as we speak. But this is what's happening. So we are used to, if we are in any kind of design project, in any kind of project that we want to do at the moment, we have certain stakeholders. We have industry, citizens, governance. And for us still, these are pretty solid. These are still pretty defined categories. And what we find now with the internet and with the Internet of Things is that these categories are spilling over. That we have to see these categories as not static, but as dynamic. So let's say that citizens have a set of qualities. So citizens are a set of qualities. Let's say they have 7 qualities. Industry has also 7 qualities, and governance has 7 qualities. Now, what's happening is that certain, let's say, 2 of the qualities of end users and citizens are now going over to industry, and 2 of industry are now going over to governance. So we're getting all these new types of organizations and all these new types of people who set up businesses very quickly and who do 3D printing and who do all kinds of processes that used to be very defined and that are now going to be more dynamic. So whoever can predict somehow a little bit about who these new entities or what these new entities are going to be, then you're going to have your edge for the coming 10 years. And this edge can be anywhere. So can be here, can be China, Shanghai, can be Paris, can be South America, Rio, can be Sao Paulo, can be London. But nobody really has an advantage. It's the same everywhere. So it's new everywhere. So there's no advantage or disadvantage that anyone has at this very moment in time. But it also means that if we think like this, that we're going to think more like in systems. So then, because we are seeing that, for example, with a thing like privacy, that privacy then is no longer something that is something that's an asset to only citizens, and that's provided for by industry and protected by legal documents. No, this privacy is something that will be distributed over the entire system. So something in my fridge, for example, may have something to do with protecting my privacy somehow. Or when I'm walking outside, there might be some privacy setting that I do with my smartphone or something like this. But we also have to accept that this 18th, 19th century notion of the Rousseau had of these our fundamental right of being left alone and privacy is pretty much gone. And so it's also up to you to build new ideas there. So you shouldn't go back to the problems that my generation has sort of made or that we think are problems. These are my problems, sort of like all people problems. You should focus on your own problems. And these own problems are going to be in here. It's going to be, what are these new entities going to be, and what is the balance between what people would like to see in such a system. This is a very good quote, I think, by Gerald Santucci. He was the head of the RFID unit, and now he's the head of knowledge sharing in the European Commission. He's also in council, and he brought me into a lot of projects. And basically, so he makes an argument. Some people say it's going to be all about the cloud. But he says, no, I don't really think so, because for the cloud, you have to have secure and full good connections all the time, and this is not always the case. So a lot of the intelligence will be first in objects. And you can think about robots. I don't think it's a coincidence that the person Chris Anderson, who from Wired, who thought of the long tail, now is in robots, and Google bought 12 or 13 robot companies in the past 2 years. I think what we will see is some kind of robots acting like routers or drones, and simply walking around and acting like data repositories and sort of sending stuff around. Would love to have one of these sort of like big bugs walking around or crawling around and sort of. But sort of this is the idea. So, and according to him, the pattern is on the side of the decentralized, embedded, smart, and connected machines. And this is not new. So in the sense that in the 70s, when Chile was really economically devastated, they asked Stafford Beer, which is a cybernetician, to come to Chile and to basically try to see what he could do with his thinking in the country. Now, there was no real time then, so he put up all the factories on telexes and made sure that the data coming from the factories, all the meaning was handled locally, and just all the things that they could not really handle went up one layer up. And then there was always something that nobody could handle, which they called an alcadonic signal, that went sort of way up. And it was called CyberSyn and CyberStride. And if you Google it, you'll find amazing things. I will show you some sort of things in a minute. But sort of basically, what he was trying to do was to see the whole sort of nation as some kind of a system that could be described at the lowest possible layer of data. Now, at that time, that was pretty advanced, and it was also he was misunderstood a lot, basically. And this was actually real. So this is not science fiction, but this was actually built to be the control room of CyberSide and CyberSyn. And if you look at it like that, you will think, well, it looks a bit science fiction, but it also looks a bit like there's probably going to be like 7 or 8 people deciding things. But that was not the way that it was conceived. At one point, he showed this picture to Allende, and at the top bottom he had put the president, and Allende supposedly said, no, the top is for El Pueblo. So the data layer that would be the top would be the people, and then it would sort of be iteratively played back. So this was 70s, and you can see you have like the domains, you have the regions, the agriculture, so all that. Of course, he couldn't finish it, but because Allende was removed from the presidency, of course. But what was important for us, I think, to understand is that he was totally misunderstood. So people thought that this was all about control, and this was all about the matrix, and this was all about getting enormous amounts of data in the hands of just a few people, and that was never the case. In fact, the program ran for only very shortly. It was very successful, actually so successful that it unearthed a lot of difficulties and managerial problems, an enormous amount of non-intrinsic, ego-invested things that went on in all of these factories, where some people actually sort of made sure that things did not run as they as they should. So the transparency that it brought actually showed an enormous amount of inefficiencies in the systems that could then be worked on. Now, so up until now, I've been, and I still am, sort of quite positive and very optimistic about all this. But also there, we must really think about this really, really well. So when I first heard about this in the 90s, I really got very scared. It took me about 3 years to simply not go crazy. I would stand in the street in a big square and imagine that every shirt, everything, every object I would see would be connected somehow, and somebody could make connections, and I didn't know about that. So anything can go on around you. As a designer, as an interaction designer, you realize there's no more interaction because I don't know what I'm interacting with. So it's all these things are just going on as we speak, and I have no clue about what's going on. So then the idea was we have to stop this. And so we tried hacking RFID, which is very simple because you just put it in the microwave or you blast it out of existence. But when everything is RFID, it's a bit difficult to put thousands of RFID things into the microwave. So it's just your microwave sort of doesn't want to do it anymore. So that doesn't make sense. And then you also see that we have this big push from logistics, but also this big push from IP version 6, which is also unstoppable. We cannot stop it. And then we also see that we have this huge pull from people, so that it's not something that is black or white. It's very gray from the beginning. So then basically we decided to really become a player in this field. So we let me see if we can sort of see this. So we set up council, which I basically set up in 2009, and there's like 180 experts on there, and I post things every day. So basically from about business models or money, we have a conference on philosophy coming up in July. Then there's all kinds of, basically I post every day about this Internet of Things. We do a lot of knowledge partnering with conferences. So from 2009, we set up conferences. We have a partner in Russia, and I'm advisor to the Shanghai conference. We co-organize the Internet of Things Washington and partnering to Singapore, Asia. So all these things sort of we set up in the past sort of 5 years. And basically, sort of we did it in order to become a kind of a player ourselves in this field. And initially we started with the designers. So the interaction designers, industrial designers, Ousmane Haq, who set up PatchPay, Christian Nold, who set up biomapping, Regine Debatty, who has We Make Money Not Art. We got together after being in all these interactive media conferences and saying this is getting crazy, because all our ideas and strange stories that we have as designers and artists and science fiction crazies are becoming real. They're going to put IP46 in washing machines and refrigerators and coffee machines and in toothbrushes. We thought that up 10 years ago as some kind of interactive art sort of project that probably nobody would be so crazy enough to do. And all these things are happening now. So we decided that we needed to have some agency in this field. That's why we set up a council in order to make sure that sort of at least what we can do is, if you Google council, if you Google the Internet of Things anywhere in the world, council is number 2 or 3. It means that we have strong influence, and this influence we use to push a kind of picture that says something about engineers, something about designers, something about society, something about philosophy, a little bit. Because this is too important to only be handled by engineers who have one particular kind of intelligence. I'm working a lot with engineers at the moment, also in a CYAD project with 15 engineers, and I realize these are not evil people, these are very nice people. They have very good particular kind of intelligence that is definitely needed and necessary, but it's only one type of intelligence. And they need to play in a team with the other intelligences at the same level. Now, we knew that if we would come as designers or artists, we would always be seen as the other immediately. And basically, you would always be seen already in a preconceived way. Now we come as industry. And as industry, then we can say, well, actually, we also know some designers or some artists. And that's a whole different way. But again, this, I think, is something that this agency is sort of good, but it is already part of a decision that we made, that my generation and my friends, that we made. We saw that we could not stop it, and that's why we decided to play with it. Maybe you could still make different choices. So I'm not saying that you should follow my choices or our choices and accept that this is happening as an inevitable given. Among yourself, I think you should still even consider the fact that you can stop it. I would not know how, but maybe you would know. Maybe you don't want to stop it. Maybe you say, okay, I want to live in this connected, fully connected world. I would say actually knowing a little bit how you grow up in the browser, that this is what you're going to go for. But then it's very important that you take over, that you don't allow old agency and old institutions and old power structures to become the new power structures in this field, because that means a huge prison. Then you get to paint the prison. That's not what you want. You want to build something else, not paint the prison. It does mean that it's quite serious. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, maybe, but it is. I really mean it. It is very serious, and it is. Your agency and your work is going to be key. Again, if you do not find a way to build this in a balanced way, somebody, and people are already doing that, they will build it in the fastest possible way, and that is a way in which what is human and how we want to live and how we want to be, that will be rooted out sort of a bit more. So again, sort of going back to this positive side, what we see at the moment is huge amounts of sharing going on, and this is something that's only happened like the past 5 years, and it's something that could not have happened in any other period, because you as a generation, you do that. You don't mind sharing cars, you don't mind sharing tools, you don't mind sharing houses and all these things, and this is happening because of transparency. But it's also happening because it's possible now to monitor a lot of devices, and if you share them and if they break down, then you can still know what happened, so that you have some kind of transparency there. We have leasing as a kind of more logical business model. With the electric car, 40% of the cost is the battery, so you don't go to buy it, you're going to lease it. And this leasing is something that will happen with a lot of devices. That's very good, because we can recycle a lot, and we can, for sustainability, it's great. It's also good because we don't get this idea of like hundreds of thousands of products that nobody needs, sort of like all this. We can actually think about more quality and then sort of about more connectivity. This full traceability and this transparency is going to be incredibly difficult for companies and governments. We already see this with the internet and with WikiLeaks, but with this type of technology, everything that you want to hide is going to be very difficult to hide. So the transparency is like the lights are going to put like full on. I once explained this to a minister somehow in a country, and sort of first thing he said was, "Watch your head," because this of course is also the end of corruption. If this is played well, it's the end of a lot of. If you put RFID in banknotes, you just trace everything. If you make basically all the payment digital, then it's going to be very difficult for people to move large amounts of money. But it's not only sort of the money traces sort of that are gone. It is just making every act that people do more transparent. So again, what we see is that a lot of governments and a lot of corporations have really been very happy with this Internet of Things until they realize that there is no stopping this. So a lot of corporations still think that I can sort of do this. I can monitor my entire operation, and I will not change. No, they will change, and they're finding now that they are changing, and they want to sort of stop, but they can no longer stop. They have to go forward. And the same thing is happening with a lot of institutions. Well, of course, there's another the negative scenario that we can see is that if we don't act, I mean, if you don't do something, then also Mexico City will probably become like 30 gated communities with beautiful, seamless Internet of Things, perfectly recyclable, and you'll probably also work there, so that we will also all work there. But there will be no more money going to the poor areas, and there'll be also no more money going to the middle. The middle is going away. The middle is going away everywhere, also in Europe. Nobody's going to invest in Spanish sewage systems anymore, with 50% youth unemployment in Spain. People are investing in gated communities and building smart, small communities where people are going to live. So the normal trajectory of what we see now is that we will end up with more Sao Paulo style and Mexico City style. Really big differences, and all the money in investment, the venture capital, will go to the smart gated community cities, and it will not go to the other areas. So that's these are. So how are we going to make sure that this is not going to happen? This is so again, sort of we need this kind of solidarity is the key. But how are we going to use it? To grow up as you do is an enormous luxury. Also, right? It's very difficult to understand when you grow up there. But this browser is just 11 years old. So in 1451 we had the printing press in Europe. But the kings and the queens did not open their printing presses to everybody, and they did not make everybody literate in 1500. They could have made everybody literate in 1500. There were 3 million people in Europe by then, and 60,000 people in London. But the kings and the queens and the priests and the popes, they did not sort of made everybody literate and make everybody smile. No, they burned them if they asked for, can I read a book? So, and this went on for quite some time. So if you ask in 1600, can I read a book in a so-called enlightened country, you'd be burned. And the first public library is 1910, 1918. So the first public library that we get in Belgium and Holland is 1918. So power is able to stall distributing learning tools for over 500 years. That's a bit too much, right? But what we see now is that with the internet and with this TCP/IP that gives us this kind of open line throughout the world, and makes all of us give all of this enormous amount of data. You've grown up in this enormous luxury of all this data. Of course, you cannot see it as you've grown up in it. Is something that you sort of still would have to use, because at the moment you're all like Ferraris on a bicycle, right? Because the power that you all have in simply knowing what you all have at the moment is so huge, is so big, but you cannot find a place to drive it, right? So you cannot find a lane to put your Ferrari on. So you're still on this bike, but you know you're a Ferrari on a bike, right? So after a while it gets sort of but I would say that this Ferrari bike lane is this smart city. So if you can get your hands on this smart city, you've got it. And then of course there's this huge unemployment, especially in Europe now. We got like 40-50% unemployment in Spain and Greece. It's not funny. And there's no more credibility of the elites. They have zero credibility. It's all gone. So basically, I would say that what this means is that we have to take over, and also the engineers, designers, the industrial designers, graphic designers, interaction designers, sort of the whole expertise of shaping systems, things, and processes. Have to become more political. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to start a political party, because that system is dead also. But we have to find the new places of power and occupy them before other people do that. So we should not waste any more energy or time on the streets. No more activism of the old school, old style things, but build businesses, set up corporations, become sort of like the biggest Mexican corporation, sort of, and then start building your own sort of smart cities. So that's basically I think the point where we are. I think it's a good point. I think if I was your age now, I'd be very happy, because there's a real struggle. And a real fight. Thank you.